then turn left. Turn left. Finally, we are here. Time to hit the road. Turn left. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left.
Good afternoon, everyone. Johnson here with the Volvo VNL. So started in earlier, was a 1.5% in this game today, last Thursday. So, yeah, let's see instead anyway, kind of go ahead and take that. It's going to be a 2,000-mile ride through Texas that I'm going to be starting with because I forgot about it. So, I'll be going through Austin City and some stuff.
turn left. finding a new route. Keep left, and then continue straight on. Go straight on.
The endless war and the prison and the court. I know. You did it for me. You did it in my name. But none of it worked. So it's time to stop now. Just say you made a huge mistake and that you're sorry. Layla knows it's a long shot. She was 3 years old when her father died in 2001. And in all the time since, the government has never held itself accountable, has never worked to reset our common morality as a country. But this young person who's about to become a lawyer, it'd be so great if she could have this little bit of hope in the forces of the rule of law.
Sarah Koenig. This episode from Season 4 of Serial was produced by Jessica Weisberg and edited by Julie Snyder, Dana Chivas, Jen Guara, Diane Wu, and myself, with Rosini Ellie, John Ryan, and Carol Rosenberg. The series is produced by Serial Productions and the New York Times. Our website, thisamericanlife.org. This American Life is delivered to public radio stations by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. Support for This American Life comes from Progressive Insurance. Remove Snapshot, offering personalized rate of car insurance based on safe driving habits. More at progressive.com, 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Snapshot is not available in California or for all agents. Thanks as always to our program's co-founder, Mr. Tori Malatia. He told me that growing up, his family had not one, not two, but three whales in the backyard.
I knew she was going to dole out. I honestly kind of wished I had been pregnant because I thought, like, maybe she wouldn't kill me then.
Next up, the Moth Radio Hour. I'm your host, Jay Allison, and this time stories about rules, breaking them badly, and following them to the letter.
When I was growing up, if I asked my mother if she was hungry for lunch, the first thing she would do would be look at her watch. And she'd look at her watch because there was a proper time to eat, and that time was noon. So if it was 11:59, no, she was not hungry. Not for another 60 seconds.
That's coming up next on the Moth Radio Hour from PRX right after this.
For News in Washington, I'm Louise Scavone. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is visiting Saudi Arabia and Israel this weekend to discuss the war in Gaza. NPR's Daniel Astron has details from Tel Aviv.
Sullivan is meeting Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and then meeting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. The U.S. has been trying to advance a deal with Saudi Arabia to open formal relations with Israel. That has been complicated by Israel's unwillingness to end the offensive in Gaza and its opposition to an independent Palestinian state. The U.S. has also been discussing a defense treaty with Saudi Arabia. Sullivan will also discuss Israel's plans in Rafah in southern Gaza. Israeli troops entered eastern Rafah this month, causing more than 500,000 Palestinians to flee. The U.S. is opposed to Israel expanding the Rafah offensive because it would uproot even more Palestinians. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Russia has opened up a new front in its war in Ukraine. Troops have pushed into the northeast region of Kharkiv, home to Ukraine's second largest city, as Russia's Vladimir Putin says he wants to carve out a buffer zone in the border region. And there's discussion about the impact of weeks of delay in the delivery of U.S. military support. Philip O'Brien is a professor of strategic studies at St. Andrews University in Scotland.
The U.S. policy has had a massive difference in the last few months. That Ukraine was never expected to be cut off by the United States, and the United States cut it off on January 1st, and Ukraine was forced to fight for 4.5 months with nothing from the U.S. basically for almost four months with basically nothing, and that meant that their losses were higher, much higher than they thought they were going to be. They were able to do less damage to the Russians than they would have expected, and they lost some ground.
Philip O'Brien of St. Andrews in Scotland speaking to NPR's Weekend Edition. The United Auto Workers Union appears to be gearing up for a fight following yesterday's loss at 2 Alabama Mercedes-Benz plants. Pat Duggins of Alabama Public Radio reports the UAW is alleging interference after the loss in Alabama interrupted a string of wins in other states.
UAW President Sean Fain claims managers at Mercedes, a German company, used illegal intimidation before workers voted by a 56% margin against unionizing.
The federal government and the German government are currently investigating Mercedes for the intimidation and harassment that they inflicted on their own workers. And we intend to follow that process through.
Mercedes has consistently denied any interference. Fain says whether the union challenges the results will be up to its lawyers. For NPR News, I'm Pat Duggins in Tuscaloosa.
It's likely to be a muddy track as horses this afternoon compete in Pimlico and rainy Baltimore for the second leg of the Triple Crown. Kentucky Derby winner Mystic Dan will be one of 8 in the race. This is NPR News in Washington. It's rattlesnake season in Arizona, where the number of bites more than quadrupled in April, and local residents are learning from the experts about rattlesnake wrangling. NPR's Alina Hartunian reports.
For starters, rattlesnakes aren't aggressive. They don't rattle to warn that they're about to strike, and they definitely don't chase people.
This is not an aggressive animal, okay? I see a shy, scary animal. That's all it is.
That's Cale Morris, who teaches the class for the Phoenix Herpetological Sanctuary. He shows students how to coax the snakes into buckets with tongs so they can safely remove them from homes. People attend the class for all sorts of reasons. Many are homeowners, like Kirsten Reyes of Tucson. She says an exterminator found rattlesnakes in her yard and immediately killed them.
You know, that kind of angered me a little bit, so I figured I'd take it into my own hands.
The best thing to do if you see a rattlesnake is to give it lots of space, appreciate it, and be on your way. Alina Hartunian, NPR News.
In Houston, temperatures are expected to hit 90 degrees. A smog warning was issued, and residents are advised to be aware of the the symptoms of heat exhaustion as they clean up after severe storms, which on Thursday had winds of up to 100 miles an hour. At least 7 people died. As the day started today, more than 500,000 homes and businesses in Houston were without electricity. Autumn in the southern hemisphere has been unusually brisk. Temperatures along the coast of Chile and in Santiago, the capital, dipped near freezing, making this month the coldest May since 1950. I'm Louise Schiavone, NPR News, Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include FJC, a foundation of donor-advised funds working to maximize the impact of charitable giving and to create customized philanthropic solutions. Learn at fjc.org.
Stephen Michael Carr found a creative way to free himself from his school's restrictive reading system. He told this at an open mic story slam in Louisville, where the Moth is promotionally supported by Louisville Public Media. Here's Stephen, live at the Moth.
So my mama read to me in the womb. By the time I was in kindergarten, I could read whole words, and whenever I was 7 years old, the movie Matilda came out. Do y'all remember Matilda? Yes. So, you know, it's about this little girl who did not fit in with her family. Honestly, I could relate. And she read so many books that she developed the power to move things with her mind. And so I spent a lot of time as a 7-year-old staring really hard at things, trying to move things with my mind. Never accomplished that, but I did manage to pop a blood vessel in my eye from bearing down so hard, right? Now, it's a good thing that my parents instilled this love for reading in me, because when I was 8 years old, my parents got a divorce, and I moved with my mom to Shepherdsville, where I did not have any friends at all, except for one person, and that was my favorite childhood author, Stephen King. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Stephen King is really not appropriate reading for an 8-year-old, and you were absolutely right. But my parents were so enamored with the fact that I loved to read that they basically just gave me any book that I wanted. I remember very specifically the first Stephen King novel that I ever purchased for $1 was at the Shepherdsville flea market, and it was like one of those holographic copies of The Shining paperback, right? Loved episodes. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that they scared me, right? My mom ended up having an affair with the man who is now my stepfather, and that was the reason why we lived in Shepherdsville in the first place. So I knew that the world was not like those books, right? I wanted to read books that were like the world that I lived in. And so I came up with an idea that I was going to beat the system. I was going to destroy the accelerated reader program, and it took me 3 years. We're talking long game, people, chess, not checkers. And here's how I did it. I started by taking the test and getting put in my reading level. I would then make sure that all the books that I read were at the very top of that reading level that I was allowed to read at. And then I would take those tests, and of course, I would pass them. And then that would bump me up to the next reading level, right? And by the time I entered the 7th grade, 12, going on 13, about to be a teenager, I got to the Bullet Lick Middle School library, and there was only one book standing between me and freedom, between me being able to read whatever the hell I wanted. It was a 13.1 reading level book, and it was Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift.
classic example, high school rebellion. Here's Caroline.
As the daughter of two former prosecutors, I became accustomed at a very early age to losing in arguments. This was not because I was unskilled at the art of debate, but because in my house, my parents were the judge, the jury, and literally two lawyers. So quite frankly, the system was just corrupt. And I can say this with confidence because my parents convinced me and my sisters to follow every strict rule of our house by posing potentially traumatic consequences to us. For example, when I was 10 years old, I left our backyard gate open and our Bichon Frise Coco escaped. My mother, furious, stormed inside our house and announced to me and my sisters, "Coco is dead." Just kidding, she said like an hour later. But that could happen if you don't follow our rules. Now, however flawed this logic may seem, it pretty much presided over my entire life right up until my junior prom after party in high school. Now, my parents' worldview was shaped by like a Law and Order SVU episode. Mine was formed by romantic comedies and teen dramas. And so when I was told I could not attend my junior prom after party because premarital sex and pregnancy were likely outcomes according to my parents, I was devastated. This was a rite of passage that I felt every teenager deserved to experience. And I was determined to experience it myself. And so I crafted a plan to commit high treason in my household and sneak out. Now, I grew up in one of those old federal houses here in Massachusetts with creaky floorboards and where doorknobs just like fall off at random. And so it was like a Victorian trap if you were a teenager trying to escape. But on the night of my prom, I took every precaution. So I unlocked our big old front door that no one ever used and left it slightly ajar so I could get out without making any sound. And I instructed my boyfriend to wait for me 100 yards down our street
is told by the self-proclaimed nerd Saad Sarwana. But even nerds sometimes bend the rules, just with science. At a Story Slam in Phoenix, where we're supported by public radio station KJZZ, here's Saad.
My guilty conscience was making my heart beat so loud it was almost about to jump out of my chest. I was standing in the principal's office with my friends, and it was possible we were about to get expelled. And I only had one person to blame for this. My chemistry teacher, Mr. Jabbar. It all started a few weeks earlier. Me and my nerdy friends, we were discussing how the cool kids would probably pull off a high school prank throughout the last few days of school. Someone said we should do one too, and we immediately started brainstorming. That's when I remembered something my chemistry teacher had said way back early in the semester while reminiscing about the good old days. He was saying he used to do an experiment where he mixed iodine with ammonia to make these crystals, and when you step on them, they pop. It was a really fun experiment, but the loud noises were too distracting, so he wasn't allowed to do it anymore. So we said, we should do that. So this was pre-internet days, so we didn't know where to, get the materials, what ratios were involved, but we did have access to this. We did have access to this one book which would help you find anything or almost anything. You might have used it when you were younger. It's called the Yellow Pages. So we looked under chemicals and we found industrial chemical wholesale. That sounded right. We gave it a call, No caller ID. Do you have ammonia and iodine? Sure, how much do you want? We hung up. So this was in, it was business to business place. It was in the industrial wholesale area. A couple of kids couldn't just walk in and get chemicals from them. So we found a piece of stationery from a pharmacy and we wrote on it 1 bottle of ammonia, 1 bottle of iodine. And since I looked innocent enough at that time, I was asked to go in. My hand was shaking. I gave it to the guy. I said, my dad asked me to pick this up. He didn't even flinch. He just handed me the things. And he's like, all right. So the next day was the penultimate day of school. We came in super early. We got some plastic glasses and plastic spoons from the cafeteria. We mixed the two mixtures in, and we could see the crystals form as we stirred the mixture. And we poured these crystals on the asphalt blacktop. And these purple crystals were almost like invisible. Being nerdy people, we had to try it out, so we stepped on it. Nothing. We stepped on it again. Nothing. Finally, we heard a barely audible pop from the edge of the spill. And so we thought we might not have used enough, so we mixed the entire batch and poured it all over this area. Now this area connected 2 school buildings and is swarming with students as they go in between classes. So in preparation for this, I looked up what happens, and it's a very common site experiment. And what happens is ammonia reacts with iodine to form nitrogen triiodide. And in the wet form, the crystals are completely stable. It's only when they dry up is when they become unstable. There are also warnings online not to use more than a gram of iodine. So we poured this on the blacktop. We went into first period, and when we were in first period, the sun came out and the crystals began to dry. Imagine the loudest thunder you've ever heard, and then double it, and you still won't even get close to how loud it was. Because once the first period bell rang, people stepped on it and bang, bang, bang. And teenagers being teenagers were deliberately stepping on this. But what had happened was by this time, there were sections, only sections had dried up and other sections were still wet. And the wet sections were getting stuck under people's shoes. years.
Okay.
But after
find a
this,
new
I had
route.
strangers come up to me and high-five me.
Turn left.
I don't even know if the cool kids pulled off a high school prank that year. Because for those final days, we were the cool kids. I guess the point I'm trying to make is if you have an opportunity to do something with no consequences, do it. You might just become a legend.
Keep left.
Saad Sarwana is known as the stand-up physicist. He's a Pakistani-American stand-up comedian, physicist, and a producer for the science storytelling show Story Collider. You can catch him live on stage or explaining science, cracking jokes on the Science Channel show Outrageous Acts of Science. And maybe you guessed it, Saad won his slam too. Sometimes it pays to push the boundaries. If you have your own story that you think could be a winner, or you want to hear more stories like these, you can go to our website, themoth.org, and find open mic story slams near you. Just so you know, we don't only air winning stories. There are lots of stories that we listen to that we love that didn't win at a slam. So throw your name in the hat, and win or lose, you might end up on the radio. In a moment, our final story in this hour, revisiting family rules. We're all grown up. That's when the Moth Radio Hour continues.
Support for the Moth comes from Odoo. Odoo is a fully integrated suite of business applications designed to simplify and streamline every aspect of your company. More information at odoo.com/moth. That's odoo.com/moth.
The Moth Radio Hour is produced by Atlantic Public Media in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and presented by the Public Radio Exchange, prx.org.
Rerouting.
Hello Houston is a daily newsletter for the busy person on the go, delivered to your inbox every morning with a quick recap of the previous day and a look ahead at the current day's news. Sign up today at houstonpublicmedia.org/Hello Houston.
Support comes from Beth Wolf Realtors, guiding their clients through the home buying and selling process for the last 45 years. Available to help with real estate transactions and more. Details at bethwolf.com.
Support comes from Comcast Business, partnering with companies to help keep their business moving by offering a network of cybersecurity solutions and round-the-clock support. Powering possibilities, restrictions apply. ComcastBusiness.com. And Shepard Mullen, a global law firm with more than 1,000 lawyers handling intellectual property, renewable energy transactions, and key litigation for a wide range of industries and businesses in Houston and beyond. More at shepardmullen.com. You're listening to News 88.7, your NPR station.
You're listening to the Moth Radio Hour from PRX. I'm Jay Allison. As kids, we follow our parents' rules without question, but as adults, we start to understand them in a different way. My mother is in her mid-90s and going strong. She's very proper. Things are done the way they've always been done. As a kid, I felt shackled by those sorts of rules and by propriety in general, but now I see them in my mother's life as highly functional. When order is failing all around us, self-imposed disciplines can square us up. As we all get older, we may need those rules to stay centered and keep us from collapsing, like handrails in the bathtub. Our final story comes from Beth Ann Fennelly, who shared it at a main stage we produced in New York City. Live from the NYU Skirball Center, here's Beth.
immediately filled with relief. But we began to see signs of mental deterioration. And we said, oh, Mom's getting dotty. And I think we chose the term intentionally because it made it sound less dire. Because in truth, it was becoming dire. And we had the sense that maybe my mom shouldn't be driving anymore. And the big constant in my mom's life is that she hated change. And she didn't want to change. And if she had to stop driving, her life would completely change. One time, my kids and I were visiting her in Illinois, and she wanted to take us to the zoo, and we got in her car on the highway, and she just swerved into the other lane. And that car was beeping at her, and she swerved back into the other lane, and that car's beeping and giving her the finger, and I'm jamming for the emergency brake pedal, and I look in the rearview mirror, my kids are clasping each other's hands in fear. And I told my mom to pull the car over, and she did, and we switched seats, and I said the sentence that I had practiced saying. I said, Mom, I don't think you should be driving anymore. And she said, pfft. And I said, and I think you need to be tested for Alzheimer's.
And then turn right.
And she said, I have been tested. I don't have Alzheimer's. And I said, can I talk to your doctor? And she said, he's busy.
Go straight on.
That was January of 2020. In March, we started hearing this strange new term, coronavirus, killing the elderly people, which meant that Mom couldn't visit us and we couldn't visit her. And her activities began closing down. One time she called me, she was upset that no one showed up for bridge. And I said, Mom, they didn't show up because it's not safe. You shouldn't be cruising for bridge partners. You shouldn't be sitting at a small table passing cards. And she sniffed, unconvinced, didn't like that, but that bridge canceled and ladies' lunch bunch canceled. And St. Mary's Book Club canceled. And then St. Mary's, the Mass, went online. And she couldn't figure out Zoom. No matter how much time I spent with her on the telephone, she couldn't figure out Zoom. And she was alone and lonely and depressed. And all of these canceled activities were more than just a dreaded change in routine. They were doors closing to the world beyond herself and to the neurons that would have been firing when she was counting bridge tricks or discussing Oprah's book pick. And I began to see the lights in her beautiful brain going out, one by one. One time I called her and I stopped her just in the nick of time from sending her money to an internet scammer. Another time I called her and the phone rang and it just rang and rang, but where could she possibly be? She couldn't leave her house. Well, she'd gotten locked out. And I said, Mom, what did you do? And she said, well, I just walked up and down the street knocking on doors till someone's called me a locksmith. It was 8 degrees in Chicago that day. So one day, well, every day, my husband and I kept having that same conversation. What should we do about my mom? And the phone rang. And it was my mother of the stiff upper lip, my mother who had never admitted to having a problem of any kind. And she said, Beth Ann, you need to come home. I said, Mom, it's okay. You don't have to feed me. I'll borrow your car. I'll go get us some
straight
food.
on,
You just stay here.
and
Just
then keep
rest.
left.
And she was following me out to the garage. She was kind of protesting, but I just kept going.
Keep left.
And I pushed open the door to the garage. And that's when I found that her car was smashed up like a tin can. She had gotten in an accident and had hidden it from me. And I turned to her over my shoulder, and she was cringing, you know, like the teenager I had been getting busted for coming in past curfew. And I had heard of that moment when the parent becomes the child. And right then it seemed like the transference was complete. And her life did change very quickly after that. I got a hold of her doctor, who said he'd been trying to get a hold of me, but she had been telling him I was too busy. And he agreed she shouldn't live alone. So that next day, I had her car towed away for parts and a for sale sign stabbed in the lawn of that big Victorian house. And my husband and I moved her to an assisted living, not a mile from our house. And what I think about now, what I wonder at, is why I didn't step in sooner. Why I had to let my mom get in an accident before I took the keys away. I think it can be so hard to shoulder aside the roles we inhabit in our childhood. And that voice I was so proud of developing, that precious voice I had nurtured, was nowhere to be found when I needed it. And I'd always faulted my mom for her inability to change. But really at that moment it was me who was unable to change. Because I didn't take action and protect her. And I failed her. Well, she likes the assisted living. It's a very structured schedule. She likes when I visit her and read her poetry and hold her hand. And she likes to come to our house for lunch and dinner. She seems to tolerate the noise and chaos better than she used to. Maybe because her vision and hearing aren't as good as they used to be. Or maybe she's changed a bit. And maybe I have too. Because I've noticed when she comes, I always try to serve her lunch at noon or dinner at 6. Because it makes her happy. And because that is the proper time to eat. After all. Thank you.
Beth Ann Fennelly, poet laureate of Mississippi from 2016 to 2021, is the author of 6 books, most recently Heating and Cooling, 52 micro-memoirs. She lives in Oxford, Mississippi, with her husband, 3 children. We asked Beth Ann if we could read a couple of her poems about her own experiences with parenthood. This is Night Game. The parents of my generation are dying. The last line of defense. We're floodlit now, pals. We're casting shadows. The shapes of our bodies distinct on this earth. Who will catch the pass? The ball that's sewn from skin. And this is one about Beth Ann's relationship National Endowment for the Arts. The Moth Radio Hour is produced by Atlantic Public Media in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and presented by PRX. For more about our podcast, for information on pitching us your own story, and everything else, go to our website, themoth.org.
Some things in life are difficult, but making a difference in our community should be. Why not take your old or unused vehicle and donate it to Houston Public Media? Take something you're not using and turn it into something you can't get enough of. We'll handle the paperwork, provide free contactless makeup on your car, and issue you a tax receipt. If it's not in the best condition, don't worry about it. We'll take it. Call 877-252-0436 or donate online at houstonpublicmedia.org/vehicles.
This is News 88.7. I'm Brenda Valdivia. It's bright, sunny skies today. High around 81 degrees. Tonight's low around 73. You can expect to see some patchy fog tomorrow morning, but sunny skies are here to stay for the next few days. It's currently 82 with a few clouds here at the University of Houston. This is your NPR station, KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. I See You with Eddie Robinson's coming up. It's now 1 o'clock.
She's an icon, a ballet dancer from Houston, recognized globally for her talent. But in the world of ballet, limited opportunities still exist for dancers of color.
Why did I not feel like I could be a principal dancer? Why? What did I not see in me that could be that? I never thought it would ever. I didn't even think about it.
I'm Eddie Robinson. Stay tuned as we chat with the first African-American principal ballerina of the Houston Ballet, Lauren Anderson. What can be done to allow more young students from marginalized communities to see themselves immersed in this field of dance? And what kind of access is needed for more dancers of color in ballet? We'll explore Anderson's life and career, both on and off the stage. Oh yeah, I feel you. We hear you. I see you. First, the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Louise Schiavone. The U.S. military says the first trucks of aid moved ashore from a floating pier off Gaza. The hope is that these deliveries will alleviate hunger in Gaza, where more than 1 million people are near starvation. NPR's Hadil Al-Salshi reports.
The pier is the size of 5 football fields and costs $320 million. The U.S. military says it wants to scale up from moving 90 trucks of aid a day to 150 in Gaza via the pier. The United Nations says Gaza needs 350 to 400 trucks a day to meet the current needs. Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, told NPR's Steve Inskeep that the situation is urgent.
So it will certainly help, but it will not be at scale enough to respond to the extraordinary needs of the population.
The World Food Program says there is a real threat of famine in Gaza. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
President Biden is in Georgia today. He's set to deliver the commencement address at Morehouse College. And the stakes are high as he seeks to rally younger voters of color in key swing states like Georgia. From member station WABE, Sam Gringlas has more.
President Biden's visit comes at a fraught moment. Campuses have been rocked by protests over the war in Gaza as the president's approach to the conflict threatens to turn off some key voters. This week, Morehouse President David Thomas told NPR he'd rather cut the ceremony short than arrest protesters. On Wednesday, Biden called into an Atlanta morning radio show hosted by Big Tigger.
I'm honored to be able to speak to the future leaders of America this weekend in Morehouse and celebrate the accomplishments of the graduates, but I've been very clear. Every American has the right to peacefully protest. Once that protest crosses the line into hate speech or violence, that's unacceptable. And so, your vote is your voice.
Any turnout dip among black voters could imperil Biden's chances to hold on to Georgia this fall.
WABE's Sam Gringlas. The National Rifle Association's annual convention returns to Dallas this weekend for the first time since 2018. Toluwane Osibamowo reports from member station KERA.
The NRA is still without a leader after longtime CEO Wayne LaPierre stepped down earlier this year. That was just before a jury found him and other leaders liable for misspending millions of dollars on luxury travel and other perks. But 10 Tens of thousands of people are expected to gather downtown for the convention. Diana Muller is the founder of Women for Gun Rights. She called the event the largest family reunion of the year.
We are peaceful, loving people that believe that the Second Amendment is important to the foundation of our country.
Activists will host an anti-gun violence rally right outside. I'm Toluwani Osibemowo in Dallas.
This is NPR. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has 1 month to gain enough ground to be included in the first presidential debate. CNN is hosting the debate on June 27th under rules set by the presidential campaigns of President Biden and former President Trump. Kennedy needs to get his name on the ballots of at least a dozen more states and improve his standing in national polls. The debate next month will take place in the swing state of Georgia. We are one step closer to understanding the origins of the iconic baobab tree, the inspiration for the Tree of Life in The Lion King. NPR's Emily Kwong shares this scientific breakthrough.
Baobabs are beloved and ecologically important trees. There are 8 species, but scientists never knew where they originally came from. Was it sub-Saharan Africa, Western Australia, or the island nation of Madagascar? On Wednesday, a new study in the journal Nature traced their genetic origin to Madagascar.
When I touched the bark baobabs at that time, I decided to get to know the evolutionary history of these special trees.
Researcher Wang Junan hopes conservationists use the study's insights to protect the baobab for future generations. Emily Kwong, NPR News.
Federal wildlife officials have declared a rare lizard in southeastern New Mexico and West Texas an endangered species. The Fish and Wildlife Service announced this week that future energy development, sand mining, and climate change could lead to the extinction of the dune's sagebrush lizard in one of the world's major oil and natural gas basins. I'm Louise Schiavone, NPR News, Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Easy Cater, committed to helping companies solve food, from employee meal plans to on-site staffing, with corporate accounts, nationwide restaurant coverage, and payment by invoice. EasyCater.com.
PBS NewsHour.
Now more than ever, you need news you can trust.
PBS NewsHour.
Unbiased, in-depth news that delivers substance over sensationalism.
PBS NewsHour.
Cutting through the noise with news that matters. World-class journalism that brings unrivaled national and global perspective home to you.
PBS NewsHour.
Elections, conflict, climate. Trust a news source that provides fair, thoughtful coverage of the events that impact our lives.
PBS NewsHour. Weeknights at 6 on Houston Public Media TV 8.
Please, Todd, record. Start.
I know, I'm sorry. I was like, we need to do it levels. LAURENANDERSON, T's and P's.
You are professional with this.
I've been doing this since 1983. I'm serious.
A show, then.
I'm serious. I know everybody says that, but I'm much better live than memorized. So it just needs to kind of happen because I'm that. And then it needs to have a 2 or 3 second because something might slip out.
You're listening to ICU. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson. She's the first African-American principal ballerina with the Houston Ballet, a remarkable milestone in American ballet. She's also celebrating 14 amazing years of sobriety. I see you as we welcome the incomparable Lauren Anderson. Lauren, thank you so much for being a guest on ICU.
Thank you for having me.
You were with the Houston Ballet from 1983 to 2006, becoming one of Houston Ballet's most beloved stars. Famous around the world, actually. It was in 1990 that you became the first black principal dancer at the Houston Ballet, one of the first black ballerinas to head a major ballet company anywhere in the world. A fact that, unfortunately, remains exceedingly rare to this day. But Lauren, I want to go back to the beginning for you. The early 70s, 1972-ish, 73-ish.
72 is when I started ballet.
Okay, well, that was when I was born. But let me tell you this.
So you're going to just let them know that I'm older?
No.
That's okay. No, you just did, baby. All right. So I was 7 years old. I'm a child. I go to school. I run up and down the street. I drink from the water hose. I skin my knee. I climb trees.
Third Ward.
the Tray, honey.
The Tray.
In Third Ward, Houston. And then we moved out to Brentwood. But school was still there. I went to Bunnyland Academy, which was on Blodgett and Ennis. Church was still there. That was down South Moore. I mean, so life was still in Third Ward. But when you're 7 years old, I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't see nobody that you don't think about it. Kids nowadays think about it because they got a phone. But I didn't. I just did kid stuff.
Sure.
And then I got in the dance studio, and it wasn't. I don't look like these people. It was like my feet don't do that. How am I going to get my feet to do this thing that they're doing? Left. And this is boring. I'm not running. I'm not jumping. I'm not.
Turn left.
What is this? Right? Why do I have to control myself? Why do I have to be? But then I found me because I had a superpower. I could jump higher than everybody else. So, and there was this boy in class named Eric. So my goal was then just to jump higher than Eric every day that I went to ballet.
Interesting.
I know. I'm just competitive.
Yeah.
Right? Real competitive.
And that, and then what, ballet? I mean, what was...
Well, my father was the first assistant principal of the high school for the performing arts.
Okay.
HSPVA opened in 71. Dad became the assistant principal of PVA in 72. And he was hiring dance teachers from Houston Ballet and musicians for the classes for the school.
Got it.
And he said, I have an overactive 7-year-old. Would this be good for her? Now I would have been diagnosed as ADHD, dyslexia, all the things, and they'd give me drugs. Back then, we'd just say go outside and play. Right. Or put them in football or ballet or gymnastics or something.
Got it.
Or an instrument, which I did that too. But, yeah, that's how it started. And they said, yeah, this would be great for her. And that's how the whole ball got rolling.
As a 7-year-old, I absolutely love dance. And what I did was blast the Jacksons, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground.
Shake Your Body Down to the Ground.
And when that song came out, I started competing in talent shows and competitions and all that. And I really loved dance. And there was something about it that offered this freedom.
Yeah, there's
this space of creativity. And it just really inspired me to want to kind of do something with it, but not particularly professionally, because I love football, I love sports, but even using those dance skills allowed me to incorporate that as an outside linebacker, defensive end.
Yeah.
And so I kind of loved the feeling that it gave me, right?
It's physical.
Yes.
There was a freedom. When I was the most me was when I was moving, whether it's me running down the street or whether it's me in a studio. What had happened was my mom was a classical pianist, and she taught piano, and she played the piano, and I fell in love with the violin, and I was introduced to that in elementary school, and I was good. Honey, I was much better at that than ballet.
Wow.
So but I loved feeling that musical thing, kind of becoming music in that way by making it. So when I got in the studio and moved to the music, that was
Turn left.
the most kind of authentic me I could be.
I'm Eddie Robinson, and this is ICU. We're here with legendary ballet dancer Lauren Anderson. Let's fast forward and go to 1990, because you became principal ballerina for the Houston Ballet, and by doing so, you had become one of the first black ballerinas to hold the title, not just in Houston, but internationally as well. For our listeners, just explain to them, what is a principal ballerina, and what's the process to becoming one?
Okay, so first, I will say I was the first black
Right.
principal ballerina
And
at the
then
Houston
turn
Ballet,
right.
right?
And that's major.
That's major. There was one, as far as I know, in a major ballet company, there's another woman named Deborah Austin. And in 1980 or 82, she became the first principal dancer at Pennsylvania Ballet.
All right.
Okay.
Another milestone.
Huge, because she was, I mean, we were all like, oh, it was huge. Then, of course, before that, there's a whole company full of black ballerinas, dancing of Harlem, etc. But it's, I mean, we kind of did it in basically a white company. So, the levels. So when you get into a company, when you become a professional dancer, there's apprentice, and principal. And principal's the top level. They normally do all the leads.
Got it.
Of course, before you become that, you have to do some leads as a soloist, and sometimes even as a core member.
Straight on.
And then now they have levels in between those levels. So it goes apprentice, core, demi-soloist, soloist, first soloist, principal. Yeah, there's a lot. And as you have more talented dancers and bigger companies, to keep people happy, you gotta move them up. So they need those levels. And people, there are people that are in between, right? Then there's the prima ballerina. Now, the prima ballerina is the top of the principal level. So generally, in the Russian school, there's 7 main classical ballets that you need to have done to become a prima ballerina. Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, The Nutcracker, Strickland Fairy, Coppelia, all these, La Sophie, La Bayadere, and yes, okay, so I've done those. I've done them all more than once. So Nina Aniashvili, who was one of the Bolshoi ballerinas, goes, Doritka, you are prima ballerina because you've done all the things. And I'm like, okay, whatever, babe, I was just dancing. I was blessed to be able to do something I loved to do since I was 7.
Yeah, and what did it mean to you for the first time you saw your name as a principal ballerina? Share that moment with us. Go.
Well, let's just go before I even saw my name. I'm in rehearsal for, what was I doing? Etudes, this ballet Etudes. And I'm about to go to the International Ballet Competition, which was huge anyway, in Jackson, Mississippi. What? I know. So it happens, it's like the Ballet Olympics. It happens every 4 years. So it goes Jackson, then Helsinki, then Beijing, and then somewhere in Russia. Oh, I don't know, some of the places. And then it comes right back to Jackson, does this rotation.
Interesting that Jackson's in the mix.
Thalia Mara wanted ballet in her town. So she so they did it.
Yeah.
They did it. Wow. All right, so I knew I was going to the International Ballet Competition, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
I'm in rehearsal for 8 years. And Stevenson opens the door and goes, darling, come here. By all accounts, you're going to be a principal dancer next year. And closes the door. And I go, and I tendu, and I shanae harder than I've ever shanaed in my life. I was like, on the inside, trying to be controlled. And it was huge. I didn't think about the impact that it would have on the dance world, or that I was the first black this or the thing. I was just happy to be a principal dancer. Of course, I realized it when, we do the bio, and you put your bio in the playbill, and it says the first black principal. Yes. When I saw it, I didn't believe it. Interesting. Because I never dreamt that. I absolutely wanted to become, my goal was to get into the Houston Ballet. My dream was to become a soloist. I did not think I had the stock or the anything to be a principal dancer.
I'm Eddie Robinson, and this is ICU. We're at our studios in Houston's 3rd Ward, speaking with one of the trainees own, critically acclaimed ballerina, Lauren Anderson. She was the principal ballerina for the Houston Ballet from 1990 to 2006, when she retired from dancing to focus on education, providing free dance programming for Houston area schools. So, Lauren,
level until I was 44.
It seemed as if you were the Coretta Scott King of ballerina.
Don't say it like that.
You had to have gone through a lot of attitudes, a lot of frustration. Other colleagues and ballerinas looking at you
Sideways, side-eye, serious side-eye. You're only doing this because you're black type things in the dressing room. Yeah.
What was going on there? Were you able to kind of get through it all, or were you being protected?
Well, no. When someone comes up to you and tells you that in the dressing room before you're about to do your run-through, there is no protection. So, there is protection. I mean, there was definitely divine intervention because I didn't bitch slap her.
Yeah, right. The tray
did not come out. It wanted to, and sometimes it
did.
No, okay.
But
so the tray we kept at bay.
Okay.
But I found ways. There's that code switching thing.
Sure.
To deal with things, and my way is that I'm gonna dance so damn well, you won't be able to say that to me again. You will not come to me with that mistake. It won't happen. Because the next time it happens, it might be a bitch slap.
This has Beyonce.
I hate to say that, but
because that sounds like what she would have to do.
No, but she is from the train. She has bitch slapped. So because honey, I wouldn't want to meet her if she was upset.
That's exactly what the tray does, right? In the sense of bringing that unity and saying, "This is what I'm going to do. Get out of my way because I'm going to bring it."
I'm going to bring it. But generally, it's unfortunate, but a lot of times we have to have an ally, right? We had to in the civil rights movement, we had allies, we've had allies for different things. And I had one in Ben Stevenson, who happened to be the director of the company. He believed in me before I believed in me. But it wasn't just about that, because he hired a black man in the company in 1976. Believe it or not, Houston Ballet has the most diverse company in the world, and we always have, right? So, but we're down here in Houston, Texas, where we got gun rats and tumbleweed. That's what people think. They don't realize that we have the opera, the ballet, the symphony, the alley, the this, the that, a full-on cultural situation. And there are many of us doing it in all many ways, and we have for a very long time. So we're absolute pioneers in that.
No one really knows that, right?
Oh no, we let them know, honey.
Okay. Coming up, we continue our chat with Houston's own legendary ballet dancer, Lauren Anderson. Being the best and the brightest comes with unbelievable pressure. Anderson was not only judged on how she performed, but she also faced scrutiny and criticism because some believed that being black somehow gave her a leg up. How did she grapple with discrimination in a world that glamorized a white European mystic? Lauren Anderson explains how she dealt with that pressure, sometimes not in the healthiest of ways. I'm Eddie Robinson. I See You returns in just a moment. We'll be right back.
walking through the stage door and smelling that smell and being in that space is one thing. But walking in the front, those giant doors that open up in the staircase and that just made an impression on me, and what the stage looked like.
Yeah.
Sitting in those seats, that I was like, wow, this is special. Right, there was something special about it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, seeing the show changed my life.
Sure.
At that point.
So you're labeled the first. Any pressure as we move forward here, going into the latter part of the '90s into the 2000s? I mean,
well, the
what
pressure.
kind of pressure did that bring you?
The pressure wasn't the first. The pressure was just the pressure of being the principal dancer and now being put at the forefront and having to carry the things.
Sure.
And yeah.
You have any coping mechanisms, or how were you able to deal with the pressure?
Alcohol and drugs, unfortunately. At that point, later, things got. I mean, I know retirement's looming, and I have a failing marriage, and all of these
Go
things.
straight on.
So yeah, I started to spiral downward, and it's a bottom that at the time I wish I hadn't had to hit, but I'm grateful I hit it because of what came out of the ashes. Yeah. So that was my coping mechanism. I probably would have danced longer if I hadn't done that to myself, but whatever, what ifs don't matter. I got enough of the knowledge to now be able to pass it on.
As a dancer, you see yourself, and others may not be able to see who you really are because there's so many mirrors. And I'm thinking along the lines of, were you thinking of your appearance? Were you thinking of your physical body? Are you going to be able to do this? These constant comments from others, you're here because you're black. Was this coming into your mind, and was that what you were fighting, these voices? What was going on that allowed you to put yourself into this madness?
Well, you just said it, there's so many mirrors, right? And that's a metaphor for a lot of things. Everything is beautiful in the ballet. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's a performance. So I'm all of these things, and that's fine, and that's what it is. That's what I signed up for. But for whatever my personality at the time was, I left and didn't ever stop performing. So I would be whoever it is you needed me to be, and that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to try to be everything to everybody, and I put it on myself. The people pleasing, that was a lot. That was a lot. So, but I became really good. The things that made me good at my job and maybe exceptional, some say. I don't think so, but whatever. That's not, we're our biggest critic. Some of the things that made me really good at what I do were the things that almost killed me.
For instance?
Perfectionism, people pleasing, grandiose thoughts of myself, my ego. I mean, all of those things. Do you know who I am? All of those things, even if I don't come that way on the outside, that was going on the inside. If you were me, you would do this too. If you only knew that victim, I became a victim of myself. I almost killed myself in the process. The blessing is that I went to recovery. And I've got I don't talk about what I'm going to have. I talk what I have today. Today I have 14.9 years or something.
Celebrating 14 years of sobriety.
Get it. Know it.
Saw that on your Instagram.
But the thing is, and that's attraction, not really promotion. I celebrate the day. I live the thing, I walk the walk. I'm here to help, because that's how I stay recovered, is I'm here to help. But what I still get to do what I love to do. I don't go to work. I go to work, but I don't go to work to work. I go to work to do the next right thing for what I need to do in the moment. And what's great about that is that I get to help kids, I get to teach kids. Yeah.
It's ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, and we're in studio with the first African-American principal relates to
Turn
dance.
left.
What do you say as it relates to this genre, the form of dance of ballet, and its future for other black girls, for instance? What do you believe needs to take place to ensure that diversity is, and the rich culture that we see
Get ready to turn
can
right.
be transformed and transitioned into young black girls, and they can really see the beauty of what it is in ballet and dance and this culture and this art form?
So access is one thing. We talk about access. Let's expose our kids to this and expose. You can expose all you want, but if they don't get it on them and feel it and feel that it's culturally relevant to them, that exposure is just like showing them, I don't know, a Brussels sprout and saying, look at this. You're going to get a lot from this. Look at it. But if they don't eat it, they're not getting anything from it. That's right. So I think, and this is one thing I may say, you know, that phone, that telephone, I'm all for the phone when it comes to this because they're able to see somebody that looks like them doing the thing. So that exposure is great, but the opportunity of them to actually do the thing and have it be culturally relevant to them is the key. That is the hook. Once you get the hook in, then you can take them to the thing and tra-la-la-la-la, because that's what happened with me. I needed to have that boy to compete with at the very beginning, or I wouldn't have stayed in there. Wow. If I didn't have Eric in there, I'm going to jump higher than this little boy right here. My goal is to come in here and turn more, jump higher, and be better than you, because these other people are just mere girls. I mean, I needed to be more, better, bigger, right? So it has to relate in some way. Or they're not going to want to eat the Brussels sprout. I get to go into schools, and 75% are more economically disadvantaged, and some advantaged. I mean, I'm all over the place. And they still sometimes feel like, well, that's not for me. But hands on your knees and biggie is for me, because that's more easily accessible. So I think it's creating a space where they feel like it's for everybody. Gotcha. And that has to also do with the way they feel about themselves. Because I didn't feel like it was for me. Why did I not feel like I could be a principal dancer? Why? What did I not see in me that could be that? I never thought it would ever. I didn't even think about it. I mean, I wanted to be the Sugar Plum Fairy, but that happened rather quickly. But the other, I mean, like crazy quickly. But I never thought that I would be the swan, the black and the white swan. I thought, oh, well, I could be the black swan because that's the jump and turning, not a color thing, just a bravura thing. But why didn't I think of myself as a soft, vulnerable person? Because society didn't tell me I could be a soft, vulnerable person. I mean, actresses talk about it all the time. Like, I'm cast as this. Because she's like this, I'm not cast as the one who falls in love with the why.
Yes.
So if they don't see it in themselves, they're not going to think it's achievable.
That's right. I'm Eddie Robinson, and this is ICU. We're chatting with Houston's own Lauren Anderson. She was the first black principal ballerina for the Houston Ballet and one of the most talented dancers of her generation. Alicia Graf Mack.
Oh, love her.
The dean, director of dance
at Juilliard.
At Juilliard. She's encouraging students to take both hip-hop and West African dance classes. You were coming up during the height of hip-hop culture. And fast forward here in 2024 and beyond, you know, hip-hop has turned 50 and it's more accepted now even in a prestigious dance program such as Juilliard. Would it have been acceptable for you to add these kinds of elements to your own dancing when you were at the height of your career?
I did. Ben let that happen. When I went to the International Ballet Competition, it wasn't hip-hop, but it was Aretha Franklin, because that's what I was into.
Got it.
And